we've got another director of Bresic Whitney on our podcast today, Andrew Liddell. Mate, psyched. Super psyched.
Thanks for having me.
It's an exciting day today. It's a very special day. Today's my 24th birthday.
Oh, congrats.
So we get to
Happy
celebrate the birthday in the Bresic Whitney office with the champion agent. And we've got some new podcast equipment, so hopefully the quality is a lot better for everyone.
Sounds good.
Appreciate your time this morning.
No, thanks for coming in.
Sweet.
Thanks for coming in.
Mate, to be honest with you, we don't know a lot about you.
That's probably that's intentional.
Yeah, it is.
From my point of view.
Is this your first podcast?
I think it might be. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it might be. be. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
All right. So you're one of the top agents, obviously, in the inner west and throughout Australia. Really, you're doing massive numbers, but you've never been on any podcasts. No one really, like, you're flying under the radar in terms of the industry itself. Like a lot of the top agents, they're on the Tom Panos podcast, they're doing all these sorts of things, and they've got big social media presence. But you're very much flying under the radar. Is it intentional?
It is, and I'm not really sure why. I wrestle with this a lot because I think. I know that if I did put more effort into it, then it probably would benefit me, from a profile point of view or from an industry awareness or recognition point of view. I suppose that sort of stuff is not really important to me. I actually have this sort of real aversion to the ego that comes with the real estate industry, which is why I said to my team, I've got a new PA, Genevieve. She's awesome, and I was asking her opinion on social media and agents and all that sort of stuff, and I think there's a few things. I mean, it has to be genuine. I think, and my personality is not to be showy or talk about myself or what I do or what I don't do. Like none of my mates would have really much awareness. I think they're aware that I'm reasonably good, but I don't think they understand that perhaps I am at the level that I am, whatever that looks like. It just feels uncomfortable. It doesn't come naturally to talk about myself. It doesn't come naturally to post about how much money I make or how many sales I've done for the month. And it's to a point where I said to my team, if I had to, if getting another 10 listings every year meant that I had to really put some effort into social media and promote myself, I wouldn't do it. It's just not me naturally. And so I've just never really done it, talked about it, to the point where, as I say, if anything, I try and sort of steer away from it, which is probably not the right thing to do. I'm sure there's a balance there, but if I was to do it, I just think it needs to be done genuinely and more akin to my personality. Yeah.
With all the types of content you've seen industry related, what type of content do you see yourself resonating with and repelled by, for example?
Well, I'll start with repel because I know what I don't like. I just don't love, and this isn't a criticism because everyone does their own thing and there's plenty of great agents out there who do promote themselves and do it really well. I suppose what I don't like is I struggle with the connection between, say, me talking about how many sales I did for this fin year, what necessarily benefit that is to the client or how much gross commission I've earned. Why would a client care? And if anything, I think there's plenty of clients around, particularly in Balmain, that would find that offensive or not that interesting. So I think what I don't like is the agents that post, their cars and their watches and their nice suits and big holidays. I don't know. For me, it's just not not appealing. I don't resonate with it. Full credit to them, and I don't sit around sort of losing sleep over it. But I just don't. It just doesn't sit with me. I suppose what I do like is I mean, I'm going to contradict myself here. So someone like Gav has a very good social media presence, but that's very much his style, and he does it very well. So I like that. I mean, I actually don't follow. I follow Gav, and I might follow. I follow a couple of other agents who I won't name, and then a couple of my colleagues. Like I went to the lengths of actually unfollowing all real estate social media agents because again, it didn't serve me, and also I can sometimes get myself stuck in the comparison game where I look at something else and I think, shit, I should be doing this or I should be doing that, or why aren't I here, why aren't I there? So I've just made a conscious effort that what's important to me is doing my best when I'm here, going home to the family, and keeping it pretty simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I think I resonate that with a lot. Like obviously I'm pretty heavy on social media, but it's not to do with that sort of stuff. It's kind of promoting, hey, look, this is what we're doing. Not so much the cars and stuff. But mate, this is you're a wealth of knowledge that's been untapped for industry. Mate, can you give us a bit of a rundown of your journey and career so far in real estate, and even before real estate, if you were doing anything prior to real estate after school?
Yeah, so I finished school 2004. I didn't go to university. I actually had this sort of odd story where my parents were very supportive, but they were very, very adamant that whatever my UAI was going to determine how well I was going to do in life. You know, so if you get 100, you're going to do really well. If you get 30, you're no good, basically. Probably not that harsh, but that was the sort of moral of the story. And I wasn't that attentive at school. I really enjoyed school, but it wasn't very academic like most real estate agents. And so at the end of school, when the envelope came with my UAI, I just tore it up into 1,000 pieces. I didn't even look at the number. It wouldn't have been that good, but I didn't look at the number. And I didn't because I didn't want that number, whether it was 30 or 68 or whatever it was going to be, to determine my sort of path. So didn't look at it. Jumped on a plane, moved to London because my father's Scottish, so I got a British passport. So moved to London at 18 and a bit and was just bartending for 2 years throughout London, Canada. I lived on Hamilton Island for 5 months. I was a bit of a nomad, just cruising around, just bartending, just trying to get a feel for what I wanted to do.
Best drink you made back in your day?
Oh, mojito? I'll make a mean mojito. Yeah. So that was a great experience at a pretty young age, traveling, having to pay rent and wash my clothes and get around, and so that gave me what I think was good life experience at that age. So that was really helpful. Came back and I'd met my now wife, and I thought to myself, well, my plan is to propose. I don't really want to propose on a sort of bartender salary. I need to pull my finger out here and work out what I'm going to do. And it's just that classic story. Someone said to me, why don't you give real estate a crack? And I, like most, thought wearing a suit most days would be pretty nice. And so I got into real estate in 2010, and basically I was pretty impatient. How old was I then? Must have been 23, 24. And I thought that I could probably do a lot more than what I probably was able to do. But I was pretty determined. And I remember at the time, Damien Cooley was the head auctioneer for the business I was working at the time. Young guy, doing really well, successful. And so I had a coffee with Damien in Double Bay, and I said, mate, I just need to pick your brain. I'm desperate to do well. I need some advice. Anything you can share with me would be really helpful. And he said to me two things. They were pretty simple, but I still share this with other people that I do speak with because I found it to be very helpful. So he said, just do two things really well, and the rest will take care of itself. First thing it was, be a nice guy. Like, be someone that people want to deal with. I know that sounds really simple, but in a service industry, and I came from, as say, hospitality, be someone that people want to deal with, because there's plenty of people out there in this industry that I don't think take that philosophy and give an experience where someone wants to come back or talk about it. So I think just be the person that people want to deal with in a very emotive, strenuous, high stakes scenario. So just be a good person, pretty simple. And then the second thing was look after buyers. He said, because you've got no listings right now, so no one's going to list with you. Why would anyone list with you? So look after buyers. So I thought, okay. So I went away and I was working in that business for probably a year. And I was, being a nice guy, looking after buyers. And then I remember one day I'd seen this bloke driving around Balmain in this black Audi. Number plates AO 430, right? It's Adrian. So he's driving around Balmain, this cool Audi A5. I'm thinking, shit, this bloke's obviously doing pretty well. Young guy, he's got plenty of listings. And then I worked out that he was actually a buyer. So I thought, well, good opportunity. I'll look after Adrian as a buyer. I was at a competing agency, but I thought I'll just do the right thing and look after him. So anyway, so long story short, he ended up bidding at one of our auctions and he missed out. He was the underbidder. So I called him after and I said, look, I know that you know a lot more than I do, but equally, if we've got anything coming up, I'll mention it. Anything I can do to help, happy to do so. And then a few days later, the principals of that business called me and said, look, heard you're pretty sharp. Why don't you come and talk to us?
Wow.
And they were fierce rivals at the time, those two businesses. And so Adrian put in a good word. Long story short, I jumped over to the business that Adrian was in as a sort of junior. And I guess that's where mine and Adrian's relationship started from, which was, as I say, 2010. So we go a while back. And I mean, at that time, he was writing $1 million. And I was still trying to work out how to spell exchange. So we were at pretty sort of different points in our career. But he's been very pivotal in guiding me through particularly those early parts of my career. And even now, he's been a mentor, an older brother figure almost. So I started in that business. A couple of years into it, I was building up enough momentum to go out on my own, and then got to a point where Adrian left the business and to come to Bresic Whitney. And at the time, I'm just trying to think of the timeline. At the time, my wife and I had just bought our first place and we had a baby. And the business that Adrian and I were in had like 40% market share, and the business that Adrian went to had no office, no market share. So it just felt like too big a risk at the time to jump ship with a new baby, new house, et cetera, et cetera. So then 18 months later, Adrian and I kept in touch. I was monitoring what he was doing. And I made the decision for cultural reasons, let's put it that way, to join. And that was almost 8 years ago now. And as I say, now I'm one of the shareholders and the directors here in the business. And so it's been a good journey.
What was the tipping point?
For me to leave?
Not so much to leave, but when you started, everyone goes through that stage where they're doing okay, and then everything changes, and it really starts to hit some real serious momentum.
Yes.
What was the tipping point? What changed?
I think I'm pretty disciplined by nature in terms of, or I suppose everything I do in life: training, eating, making phone calls. I like structure. I know exactly what my day looks like. I know exactly what the next 12 months looks like. I've got holidays booked. Everything's in the diary. I'm a bit obsessive like that. So I suppose because I didn't have profile back in the day, my tipping point was really just being super consistent around making the calls, looking after buyers, and then I suppose over time, eventually, it got to a point where, people would start talking about me. They might refer me to a friend, but it took a little while. It probably took sort of 5 years, I think, to get to a point where I had some form of traction, some form of momentum, a little bit of profile. But it's been a longer journey. But I couldn't really sort of pinpoint a tipping point as such, but it was more just about every day making the calls, doing the right thing, and just knowing that if I did those things, it would all sort of, eventually work out.
Yeah. Keeping the process.
Pretty much. Yeah.
In terms of hours, I'm having this debate with a couple of guys at the moment. in terms of hours and the hours you put in to become successful, how many hours do you have to be doing a day? Like, is there a magic number where you have to be putting in that certain amount of hours to really hit momentum? And I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about when you're coming up the ranks.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm probably a bit old school in the sense that I do think that there's a certain level of commitment that is required, particularly in the early days, because you have nothing else. You have no profile, you have no track record. So why would someone want to list with you? I remember one of the first listing appointments I went into, I said to the guy flat out, I don't have the track record, the experience, the knowledge that the other agent you're talking to has. I'll acknowledge that. But I will out-hustle them, I'll outwork them, and I'm happy to do it for a discounted rate because I don't think I deserve to be paid 2% because I'm not a 2% agent at this point. So in the early days, and I suppose it was easier back then with no kids, I would work pretty long hours. You know, I'd be in by 7:30, leave by 7:30 the next night. But for me, you know, I guess unfortunately or fortunately, this is very much a lifestyle. You know, it's not a role that turns on or off. You know, even on holidays, and that's probably my one big gripe with this job. Even on holidays, you're on. But only if you want to be. And I make that decision every day that I take this seriously. I enjoy what I do. I want to be good at it, and therefore, a certain level of commitment is required. So in answer to your question, in the early days, it was grinding. I've done 6 days a week since I started. I should probably look at changing that now. But yeah, I would say it definitely requires a certain level of commitment, and I don't think there's a set hour period, but it is definitely time, energy, effort, and sacrifice. Sacrifice when your mates knock off at 4:00 and they're at the pub. You've got to make the decision. You know, how badly do you want it? And I wanted it badly, and I still want it badly. So yeah, it's effort. Yeah.
Just to give us a bit of perspective to where you've come and where you are now, are you able to share with us a bit about the numbers you've done over the last financial year?
Yes. Yeah. So again, I don't even track this that closely either. But so fin year, I've done. I think it's 3.2 something in gross fees. This calendar year so far, we've done 55 sales as of today. So the goal is to crack 100, which I think is possible. It's certainly a team effort. So I've got it's myself, and then I've got Brandon and Merity who are agents within my team. We don't sort of talk about juniors or associates. I mean, they are just agents within my team. And then I've got Genevieve, who's my full-time sort of team manager. So she sort of runs the show in the background. So, yeah, I mean, this was definitely my best year to date. You know, I in terms of sort of what the future looks like, numbers, gross fees, I have a view, rightly or wrongly, that there is, because of that commitment piece, I believe that there's a point where you can push super hard, and then beyond that, other things need to be sacrificed. Mainly my personal life, which is my wife and my 4 kids. So I don't have, as I say, I'm bloody determined, and I'll work till I'm blue in the face. But I also recognise that to get to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 million, it would mean that my family would suffer, and I'm not prepared to do that. I would much prefer to have, you know, a really comfortable, enjoyable life where I can still have my 5 or 6 breaks every year, send the kids to school, and have a great relationship with my wife, and know that that's enough. Yeah.
What does your life look like now to be able to sustain the level of success, energy, everything right now, like in terms of what's your daily structure, wife, kids, gym, all that sort of stuff?
It's fucking hard. I can't tell you.
Do you ever face burnout?
I actually reckon I'm at that point right now.
Yeah.
I'm cooked, if I'm very honest. Look, it doesn't help that we've just sold, we've just moved house, all my kids are sick. It's a bit of a storm at the moment. Do I face burnout? Look, again, a few years ago, I was getting to a point where I was running at a pretty fast pace, didn't quite know how to handle the volume, the pressure of, being a full-time agent, doing decent numbers, and having and wanting to have and having a partner and multiple children at home it's a lot to do, because like a couple of my colleagues were saying the other day, they can't wait to get home on a Saturday because they're done and they just want to sit on the couch and do nothing. Now I can't do that, right? I get home and it's like my second job starts. My kids are still very young, so they're not sleeping through the night. So last night I went to bed at midnight. One of them got up at 2. The other one one of the other ones got into the bed at 3. Then my alarm goes off at 4:45 to go to the gym.
Oh, right.
And again, I've just got to make that decision. How badly do I want it? And I was so tired, desperate to roll over, but I dragged my ass out of bed and went to the gym. Yeah. So in answer to your question around my routine, I train 3 or 4 mornings a week. Alarm goes off at 4:45. I'm out the door. I'm home by 6. And I guess the idea behind that is so that my wife can have as much support as possible. I'm home by the time anyone wakes up, so it doesn't sort of interrupt her day. So home, I'll do the...
To interrupt, what training do you do in the morning?
I was doing F45 for a few years, but it was sort of wearing a bit thin. I was getting a bit bored, so I just joined a CrossFit gym of all things.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, which is actually pretty intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, some seriously fit people there, but it's enjoyable. It's a good challenge.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So train in the morning, home by 6. I'll do the 3 big kids' lunches who go to school or preschool.
Devon and tomato sauce, or is it upgraded now? You're a streamline.
No, it's a little bit more exotic than that. So I'll do the lunches. I'll get the baby up, change nappy, get them all fed, ready for school. My wife will have a shower. She'll come down. I'll have a shower, and then I used to get in the office early, 7:30. Now I'll do the school run 3 mornings a week, and just be a bit more present at home in the morning to help out my wife. So I won't get into the office till probably 9 most days, which is a bit later than I'd probably like. But again, I probably could get here at 8, but it would mean that I wouldn't see my kids, and my wife wouldn't be that thrilled, and it's not for a good home life. So into the office circa 9. And then it just means that, my time is so precious now. I've really got to make the most of the time that I am here. So I know what I'm doing the night before. I'm super structured with my calls. I know what calls I'm doing the next day. And I really do, I guess, the typical sort of AM, PM thing. So AM in the office, making calls, and then PM out doing appointments, open homes, listing appointments, etc. And then I'll do late appointments if I have to, like if it's someone signing up or something like that, I'll do late appointments, but I'm typically home by sort of 6:30 to then jump back into dinner, bath, bed, etc., etc.
So you're home by 6:30?
Try and get home by 6:30. Not every night. Yeah. Not every night, yeah.
And calls, are you calling the database, or are the agents within your team calling your database, or a bit of a mixture?
No, I call my own database. I mean, whilst we have a shared system that we all have access to, Merity and Brandon have their own contacts that they nurture and call, and I have I've got about 2,000 contacts in my database that I call on a pretty regular basis.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's not other people calling my contacts, and I think that's probably how I've managed to, a lot of my business is people that I've chased for years, just because of the persistence point of view. Yeah. So no, I do most of the calling.
Cool.
Yeah.
Another question that's on everyone's mind right now: the market. Where do you see the market going? I know it's a tough question.
Yeah.
But where do you see the market going?
That is a good question. And I suppose it depends on what market you're talking about.
Let's say Sydney in general.
Yeah. Look, I think it's probably fair to say that if the experts are right, there's probably a little bit more pain to come over the next 6 months. And then I have a sort of personal view that, as someone pointed out, the environment that we've been in for the last 2 years is not normal in terms of interest rates, auction clearance rates as high as they've been, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just tricky, because we all became very accustomed to that, and that felt like the norm, but that's not actually the norm. The norm is higher interest rates, an auction clearance rate at probably 50 or 55%, not 80% or not 30%.
Yeah.
So I think once the market, buyers, agents, sellers, etc., become more comfortable that that's the new norm, I think it will become a sort of stagnant market where it just sort of settles for a period. And then, of course, whenever that is, 2, 3, 5 years' time, it'll probably kick off again. But I have a more sort of longer term view as an agent and even as a consumer. As I said, my wife and I just sold. We're technically buyers now. We would still buy now because whatever we buy now will sit in for 10 years. And again, I sort of take the view that you cannot pick the bottom of the market and have the perfect house pop up and have no one else want to buy it as well.
Yeah.
So look, I think there are definitely people out there who feel anxious right now, which is fine. I understand that. But I think there's probably a bit more pain to come for the next 6 months, and then hopefully it just sort of settles and we become more accustomed to it. Yeah.
Something off the back of what you just said, then transitioning into a marketplace where agents, buyers and vendors are feeling anxious, and you've just mentioned you're leading into a period where you're starting to feel a little bit of burnout. What are some things you've done in the past or can recommend all of us do when you're in that situation?
I just try and go back to the sort of handful of basics that I know help me, as Ivan Bresic would say, work from centre. And that's actually that line he said years ago, and I always think about it because particularly in this game where it's high emotions, high stakes, pressure, big hours, etc. If you're too high all the time, talking about how wonderful you are, inevitably you get shot down. Equally, if you're too negative and it's always the comparison game, it's hard to sort of get back up again. So I think I try and get back to some of the basics that I find help me work from centre, which is like I did a meditation course probably 5 years ago now, which again was a recommendation from Ivan, and Maclay Longhurst and I did it together. And again, it was at a point where my life was getting busier, work was getting busier, more kids, more pressure, and I found myself feeling overwhelmed, probably more than I wanted to be. And as I say, because of my nature, I prefer to just to sort of keep calm, keep steady. So I did this meditation course, and whenever I feel myself uncomfortable or I can feel myself feeling tense or stressed, I jump back into meditation and it really helps. So I try and meditate every day, sometimes even twice a day if I can, but typically every day for at least 20 minutes.
When during the day would you do that usually?
Around 2:00. If it's too early in the day, I've got too much to do and I'm sort of not in the right headspace. If it's too late in the day, I'll probably just fall asleep. So after lunch and before 3:00 is the sort of time when I do it. I actually just jump in my car. I just do it in my car. We got a garage, so we're pretty lucky. So I just jump in my car because otherwise it's too noisy up here.
Yeah.
Jump in my car, 20 minutes. I've got an app, and it just helps.
What app?
Calm.
Cool.
It just helps me. It just helps me reset. And again, I won't go into the sort of the boring detail of it all, but the idea behind taking that time just to settle, in fact, actually gives you more. It's like a springboard into the afternoon. So I know that if I meditate at 2:00 and I've got an afternoon appointments, and then I've got to go home to 4 crazy kids tearing the house down, I need energy for that, and I need to be in the right headspace. So if I can do that, reset myself, knock off my appointments, feel pretty good about that, and go home in the right headspace, then that's helpful for me. So meditation, diet. I never drink during the week, so I just always made a rule that a glass of wine or beer. I just never ever drink during the week, school nights. I'll enjoy a glass of wine on Saturday night or whatever it may be, nothing too wild. So I don't drink alcohol during the week. As I say, I train. I charge my phone not in our bedroom. Now, I know that's a small thing, but again, this was a tip from Ivan. Like, if you charge your phone next to your bed, inevitably you're going to sit there and scroll and get caught in the rabbit hole of YouTube watching cats or something weird, right? So phone gets charged elsewhere, and I try and read 10 pages. I'm not a natural reader. Like, I'd probably prefer to watch car videos on YouTube or something. But I find that if I can read 10 pages, and I do that because my phone's not there, so I'm sort of forced to do it. So read 10 pages and fall asleep, I find that pretty helpful. So it's really just, as I say, meditation, training, eat as well as I can. I'm really close to my family. Like I see my family, every week or every fortnight. As I said, I've got a wonderful wife, 4 great kids. So if I can do some of those smaller things, it just helps me manage the busy life that I have, I guess. Yeah.
Coming back to the changing market, what are you doing? Are you doing anything different from a real estate point of view?
I've probably slowed down to speed up, if that makes sense. And I suppose what I mean by that is, rather than in March, right, or February, when the market was really flying, you could move at such a pace where it was all just sort of happening anyway, and you could not cut corners, but you didn't have to have as much detail with a client, as much time. Whereas now I'm having to slow down and really go back to some of those basics, like last night I had a long Zoom call with a couple who are unfortunately separating. Their house is going on the market today. So I guess when the market's firing and everything's sort of happy days, you take photos, stick them on the web, and away you go. Whereas now it was really important that I actually spoke to them in detail last night about what the next few weeks looks like, what to expect, what does our strategy look like, what are we going to do if we're not in the right space in 2 weeks' time, and just taking the time to set it up properly, which I know will pay dividends in the next few weeks. So I'm just taking a bit more time with each client, lots more communication. But I think, as my experience has developed and I've been in the game longer, that sort of stuff has become a bit easier. Like if you take it to the next level, which is Adrian, he's been doing it for 20 years, like the bloke could sell you that microphone. So as time develops and as you become more comfortable with what you're doing, it becomes easier. And I have found that, but I'm still learning, and there's still plenty of room for growth. So, but now, in answer to your question, in a changing market, I'm just taking more time, more support. Like some of my days on market has extended a little, but at the end of the day, the clients feel so much support and no pressure that whether they get X, Y, or Z in terms of the actual outcome, they're raving fans, they're referring, they're sending great testimonials. So if it means that it takes me 5 weeks, not 3 weeks, I'm cool with that, because it means that I've got a happy client at the end of the day. Yeah.
It's actually an interesting point, because you see a lot of agents, I see a lot of agents rush to sell quickly to avoid their reputation of selling long in the marketplace. So it's an interesting point where
I've got one going through today that's been on the market for 6 months, the longest campaign I've ever had.
Wow.
Jeez.
But these clients I've sold for 3 times. I've sold to them twice. I actually sold this house to them 10 years ago. And like, it's been pretty arduous. 6 months is a long time. Like, what do you say after 3 months? But they're raving fans. They're so appreciative. They've referred me to someone in the meantime. So rather than me trying to sort of, bash them over the head and say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? I've done my very best to educate them, but they weren't ready to be educated. So I've just supported them and said, look, let's keep going. It's exchanging today, touch wood. So it just takes a little bit of time.
That's such a great point. I heard it at ARIC. One of the speakers said, when you're faced with a problem, try and use that problem to create a raving fan. And it's so easy when we're in a problem like that to think, we should, manage this problem differently. But you've got a referral out of it. So
it's again, particularly Balmain is, I suppose, all I can speak of. But Balmain's a very small world. Everyone knows everyone. Everyone knows everything about everyone. So I just learned from the very beginning. Again, I suppose going back to Damien Cooley's advice: do the right thing, be a good person, because you just never know how that's going to come back.
So, out of curiosity, I've got this issue with a listing at the moment. If you've got a client and they're nice people, great people, but they're not listening to the market, to what you're saying, they don't want to be educated at the moment, you don't take them off the market. You'll continue to pursue, even though it may be hundreds of thousands of dollars above where the market's actually sitting.
Good question. I suppose it depends primarily on their motivation. I mean, if they're absolutely not motivated at all, then you've got to ask yourself, like, are you trying to push shit uphill? I find what's helpful is giving a client options, because then effectively what you're doing is removing the pressure from yourself and putting it back on them. So as an example, the one I'm selling today, we're 4 months in, I've met with them a few times, we're going nowhere, we've pushed the auction back, we've dropped the guide, we've done everything to try and engage the market, nothing doing. So then I send them an email, a very supportive one, but relatively direct. And I say, guys, here are 3 options. I'll support whichever one you want to do, but it's important that I think we should do something. Here are the 3 options. Option 1 is we have a bid on the table and we consider engaging with that buyer. I know it's a lot lower than where you want to be, but there is actually an option there to consider a sale. So that's option 1. Option 2 is we try and find you a tenant and we attempt the sale again in 6 or 12 months' time, whenever you feel comfortable. Option 3 is we go to the lengths of restyling it. Let's call it a 2-bedroom house instead of a 3-bedroom house. Let's paint the fence white because it's starting to look shabby. Let's do something to reinvigorate the campaign. Here are your 3 options. I'll support whatever you want to do. If I had to give you a recommendation, I'd probably try and engage with a buyer. And I only say that because we're 4 months in, we're not week 1. So I'm not trying to press you to consider a bid that you don't want to, but here are your options. I'll support whatever you want to do. Let's jump on a call in an hour and we can discuss. So then they came back, Andrew, we can't rent it. So let's not have that discussion. We can't rent it. We've bought elsewhere. We're committed to selling it. So that option's off the table. Cool. Okay. What about option 3? Are you interested in investing more to see if we can go down a different path and re-engage the market? No, we've got no more money. We don't want to do that. We want to sell it. Okay. So is it fair to say that option 1 is now something you're interested in talking about? Well, yes, I guess it is. So it's almost them, it's them sort of acknowledging that they have options. Everyone's always got options, but the other 2 options were things that they didn't want to discuss. So as I say, rather than telling someone that they should accept a lot less than what they want to, I find it helpful to educate in a different way, which is a more sort of supportive, giving options. And as Adrian said to me many years ago, that the more you try and force a deal that's not ready to be forced, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And a vendor, more often than not, will do the right thing at the right time. Sometimes that happens day 2. Sometimes it happens day 102. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love that.
It seems between your network and what you've learned and acquired over the years, you must have some either core principles or values that attribute to what success looks like for you. Could you share? I'm very curious to learn, what does success look like to you, and what are the principles and the foundations you follow, or the values that underpin that?
In real estate or in life?
Both.
Look, I think for me, like humility is a really big one, which accounts for both personal and business. I don't know why it's so important. My parents are pretty humble people. They've done really well, but they're pretty humble. And I think different people resonate with different styles. Adrian and I, whilst we're very close and have been for a long time, we have a very different style, and different clients are attracted to him and think he's pretty wonderful and think I'm soft and vice versa. So I think you just got to pick your mark and play the game that you want to play and not try and do something that doesn't feel right. But I think humility is a big one for me. Again, I've just experienced too many times the idea that if you do the right thing by someone, it eventually pays itself back at some point in time. So doing the right thing by people, consistency is a big one. I think consistency is one that, that's the difference between anything in life, whether it's diet, exercise, relationship. Anyone can be good for a minute or 30 days. But I think, consistency is one that I think if you consider all the top performers in the industry probably have that common trait, which is they do it well, and they do it for a long time, and they stick to that sort of model. So I think consistency, humility, doing the right thing. I don't take myself too seriously. And again, I also want to enjoy the balance of life as much as I can, as I say, with a busy personal life. But I place a huge amount of importance on holidays and breaks, because, you know, when I am working 6 days a week and I can't be there as much as I'd like to be, I know that in 4 weeks' time, like in 2 weeks' time, I'm taking the kids skiing for 10 days. Now that doesn't necessarily, I don't want that to necessarily make up for the time that I'm not at home, but it's something for us all to do and to look forward to. So just try and balance things out as much as I can.
Is there anything you do for yourself during that period?
Yeah, good question. Not really. And look, I'm just in the stage of life where there's not a lot of time for that. Now, maybe there should be. Look, there probably should be. I suppose that, you know, my 50 minutes in the morning at the gym is probably the time to myself. My 20 minutes of meditation is time to myself. I would love for both my wife and I to have more time to do certain things that sort of fill our cup, so to speak. I just think we're in a tricky period where we've got, as I say, we've got a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 8-year-old. We've got a lot on, and this is just that period of our life where, you know, the kids come first, and that's just the decision we've made. So, you know, we try and do little things, like I'll you know, book Amy in for a facial or a massage, or, you know, I've booked her in for a dinner with one of her girlfriends in a couple of weeks' time. So we try and do little things where we can, but it is hard. It is actually pretty hard to try and fit it all in. So, in answer to your question, no, there's not a lot I do for myself. I would like to think that once the kids are a little bit older and we've got a bit more routine and everyone sort of sleeps through the night, we can probably focus on that a little bit more. Yeah.
What do you do before the kids when you burnt out? Like, let's say you had a holiday book, but you were burning out before the holiday. What happens?
I don't think I ever really got burnt out before the kids.
Yeah.
Because I enjoyed the work so much. I was so determined to do whatever it took to succeed. I worked really long hours, and the sacrifice didn't feel like that much of a sacrifice, because I suppose selfishly it was just Amy and I. Whereas the burnout now comes from, as I say, you know, after, like, I speak to Maclay pretty regularly, and, you know, he says to me the same thing. He says, mate, when I go home at night, like I can't even talk. Like, I'm just that, I'm spent. So I think that the burnout is now where I've got the sort of the double whammy of a busy work life and a busy home life. I don't remember getting burnt out before that, because I was, as I say, I was, well, a bit younger and pretty determined just to make it work, and I enjoyed it so much it didn't really feel like burnout. Yeah.
I think another thing where a lot of agents are kind of struggling with, maybe not even so much burnout at the moment, but a lot of agents are obviously finding it a lot tougher now. Like, I'm seeing, especially some people that I know, that they were doing good numbers, and now some of them haven't sold anything for a month or two. And I know someone that's kind of faltering on the line of, hey, what do I do next?
Yep.
What would your advice be to people in real estate that are kind of teetering on the fence around what their next move is if they jump out of real estate, if they keep going?
Yeah, that is tough. And I even experienced those moments too sometimes where, like, I remember in March, you know, I had my record month, whatever, and everyone was, you know, giving me high fives and shit, which was nice. But I just know from experience that you can go from there to nowhere in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So again, I try and keep my feet on the ground, don't focus on it too much. But in terms of how to deal with this new environment that we're in, which, you know, is a lot more challenging than what we all became accustomed to, I think you have to, a couple of things. I think you have to be kind to yourself, because it is bloody hard. It is bloody hard. You can't force someone to sell if they're not ready to sell. So there's only so much you can do. I think I heard someone say the theme was talking about whether it's interest rates, COVID numbers, whatever it may be. This gentleman was talking about surrendering to these external factors you have no control over. And it's a bit like that saying, John McGrath, there's two markets. There's one in between your ears and then there's one that's external. You can control what's in between your ears. You cannot control what Philip Lowe says at the next RBA board meeting. You can't control the next 3 cases of monkeypox that are going to come up next week. So I think surrendering to the external noise, I think, is really important. If you're in a headspace that's got some sort of choppy waters, and I'm terrible. I look at social media and media all day long, and sometimes I think, oh fuck, this market's terrible.
Yeah.
So I think trying to remove a lot of that noise and a lot of that external stuff that you cannot control, because whether you read one article or 1,500 articles, interest rates are rising, and that's just a fact.
Yeah.
So I think surrendering to those things because you can't control them, and then having a bit of faith that if you do the fundamentals and you're consistent around things like prospecting, you'll still do business, because people still have to buy and sell. There's no doubt about it. People will still do really well in this market, but the hard part is when the market's good and it gives you that natural energy because there's deal flow. It's easier to be more proactive because you can see those sort of short-term wins. Whereas right now, I know that if I take the attitude of fuck, it's a bit hard, I might take my foot off the gas, and I'll just sort of hope that things pick up in spring. I know that if I don't do the work now, that very much affects my spring. So I think if you're faltering or if you're wavering or if you're finding it hard, I guess the unfortunate answer is you have to still do the work, because even if you don't see an immediate result, I can guarantee you in 90 days you will. And again, a lot of my business comes from just being persistent.
Yeah.
Like I got a call yesterday from a seller. I met him 8 years ago. Like my notes are pretty detailed. So I met him 8 years ago at an open home. He bought a house through a competitor. He then used that competitor to sell his house in Rozelle. And I kept him on my database. I've called him every 4 months, every 6 months, let him know what's sold, send him my weekly market report. Like my notes are, they're almost a bit borderline obsessive.
That's relentless.
Yeah. And he called me yesterday and he said, mate, we've decided to sell now. We were going to buy first. We're going to sell first. We feel like that's a better move in this market. Chatting away. And I said, Brendan, can I ask, when we meet tomorrow, just so I can come prepared, are you about to go through a sort of lengthy interview process? Or if we went through everything yesterday and you felt comfortable with what I had to say, you'd feel confident and comfortable appointing myself and Bresic Whitney? He said, no, mate, we're not talking to anyone else. You've been great. You've been persistent. You've called me relentlessly. As long as there's no surprises tomorrow and you're not going to charge me 3%, then let's rock and roll tomorrow. So I think, that's hard to explain to someone that's perhaps early days or going through a rough patch, because it's not an instant reward. And I'm impatient like everyone. I want that listing yesterday. It's just not the way it works.
Yeah.
So I think, if you're in a dark spot, and I've been in them before as well, you just have to remember, again, get back to the basics, stick to your diet if that's important to you. If you want to train, do the things that fill your cup and make you feel good about yourself and your environment, and then make 20 calls a day, make 50 calls a day, make 15 calls a day. Do whatever you're going to do, but do it consistently, because whatever you do now has a major impact on the next 90 days.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's massive. What was been the hardest part of your career and the toughest or the darkest place you've had to navigate?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because it's funny, we always speak about the highs, but we
never see the lows.
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge I have had, and probably continue to have to a certain extent, but I've done some things to alleviate these things, is the comparison game. I find that so hard.
I'm the same.
I find it hard because whether you're selling 3-year or 253 a year. There's always someone doing better or worse than you. So it depends on how you look at it. You can play the comparison game and make yourself feel really good, or more often than not, you can play the comparison game and make yourself feel like shit. Like, again, Ivan used to say to me, comparison is the thief of joy. You can't really compare yourself to someone and get much good out of it. So I remember, and I sat in this boardroom and I told Adrian about it. I was really upset about it, actually, because I remember there was a period where I wasn't doing very well and Adrian was flying. and he was telling everyone about it too. And I felt like shit. I felt terrible for two reasons. I felt terrible because I was comparing myself to him, and I also felt really terrible that I couldn't feel joy for my mate that was doing really well. It was all about me. So I've made decisions over the last few years to try and just focus on myself, not from a selfish, narcissistic point of view, but I think, as I said, I can't get into that headspace where I'm looking at others, comparing myself. It just doesn't help me at all. There's that classic photo of I think it's Michael Phelps, and he's doing butterfly, and he's winning, and these two competitors. No, it must be freestyle. The two competitors swimming alongside him behind it, but they're both watching Michael, and he's just out in front, just focusing on the finish line. And so I like, for example, because I'm one of the directors in the business, every month the numbers come out of every single agent in the business, and I'm fortunate enough to hover at the top of the list, perhaps not number one in front of McClay, but towards the top of the list. But no matter whether I was number 4 or number 2, I'll always think it's not good enough. So I don't look at those numbers anymore, because it shouldn't matter what Adrian's doing, what Jack's doing. It should just matter what I'm doing. So I'll probably change that at some point when I can mentally look at those numbers and not have those questions in my head. But as I say, I don't look at what anyone else is doing, because it doesn't help me. As I say, I don't follow any agents on social media, except for a couple that I find probably more empowering than anything else. I try and focus on, as I say, just having really good people around me. Adrian, I've got a business coach. My wife's unbelievably supportive. My brother and I, we're best mates. We speak 4 times a day. So I try and keep my circle pretty tight. I'm not out, like, again, I've got young kids, so I couldn't do it anyway, but I'm not out there at the latest, restaurant launch, clubs, carrying on. I keep a pretty simple life. So I think, in order to stay sort of grounded and keep focused, I just try and remove as much distraction as possible. Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's pretty boring.
Mate, it works. And that's the main thing. My last question for you, and it usually is the last question, what would be your number one piece of advice be for someone coming up the ranks?
I think coming up the ranks is challenging. I found it really challenging in this market because I was pretty young at the time. All my competitors were principals, owner of businesses. So, again, why would someone list with me when they could list with Joe Blow, who's got 20 years experience and a track record, and they own the business? So I had to learn patience. And I think that's a really big thing for agents coming up, is everyone wants everything now. And again, as I said, I can give you 10 examples of some of my clients who I've been speaking to for years. And that is the hard part. Like, most agents want to prospect, and in 3 months' time, if nothing comes of it, end of story. Or if someone's not ready to sell in 3 months, that they just won't keep chasing. Whereas I've just learned that persistence and patience and consistency, that they're the things that have helped me have a more robust business now, where I get probably more calls in than I have to make out. I still make plenty of calls out, but I'm now at a point where I've got some profile, I've got some referrals, and there's more sort of focus on me than necessarily me having to chase as hard. So I think the advice I'd give is, I'd probably repeat Damien's advice: be a good person, look after buyers, and just be patient.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Legendary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
That was
All right.
perfect.
Legend.
Well done.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay.
First podcast done and dusted.
Unreal.
That was awesome.
Killer. Mate, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bree.
Pleasure. Yeah, thanks.